Come on then, where are we with this schedule then? Read a lot, we're hearing a lot. Ben Stokes has retired from one-day international. Unsustainable for him to play all three formats. Are certain sides playing too much cricket and not enough? How do you see all of that?
Yeah, I still think it's going to be a challenge moving forward. You know, Johnny's at the peak of his powers at the moment. He's speaking extremely positively when he wants to play. And I think, you know, the huge line in the sand this week has been Ben retiring at the tender age of 31. You know, Ben has been an integral part of English cricket for a long time. He should be an integral part of all three formats. English cricket has done everything to look after him. He hasn't played all of the international schedule. He missed the IPL. He didn't play all of the county games for Durham. They mapped out a road which was going to determine his best preparation for our summer and possibly the winter. And it's still too much, which, you know, it's not enough, because when you have your best players struggling and they're being looked after, you know, really, really well, to me that's probably not the biggest concern. Yes, it's a huge concern that you have your best player talking ill of the game and not happy with what they're doing and what they want to do. But if you look at guys who are battling in and out of a team or trying to decide which format is their best format, they will be forced to decide a lot earlier than your better players. And for me, that is a big issue in the game.
What has to go then?
Well, ODI cricket's been forced a little bit out of the game at the moment. I don't see Test match cricket going anywhere. I don't see T20 cricket going anywhere. So clearly they're the two formats that have been identified, well, for Ben certainly, but other players around the world. But I think we're getting closer and closer to players having to choose earlier in their career, because there are more options to play around the world and in different teams to earn good money, but long-term money. Johnny mentioned a quick book. You know, T20 isn't a quick book anymore. There are huge tournaments around the world, and a lot of them for young cricketers to go out there and say, you know what, I actually can make 8 months of the year I can go and play cricket, as opposed to just 2 if I play T20. I know when I finished playing Test matches back in 2012, the decision for me to continue playing white ball cricket back then was purely based on what I was good at and what I would have to do to get back in the Test team. And to get back into the Test team, I would have had to play a full, you know, I'd sacrifice ODI cricket and T20 international cricket to play a full season of county championship cricket. And even still, we had a very solid top order back then. If I was in the top 5 run scorers in the county, you still need somebody to be performing badly to get a spot in one team that Test match cricket is about. And for me, the decision was based on what I thought I was going to excel at. And that for me was white ball cricket.
I think the game's at a tipping point right now. It's a tipping point that's long been coming since probably the advent of the IPL. I think when people look back at this period, the first 2 decades, say, of this century, they'll see a game which has changed more rapidly, probably than any time in its history, and is going to continue to change rapidly. But you can argue that the tipping point has come now if you take South Africa's decision recently to abandon the 3 ODIs in Australia next year. So they decided not to go to Australia because they want to set up their own franchise competition in January in South Africa, and they want their best players being available. And they are happy to slightly imperil and put in at threat their participation in the next World Cup in India, because it's the top 7 in India that qualify automatically. South Africa currently in 11th place, so they may have to go into the qualifying tournament in Zimbabwe. So that tells you all you need to know about where the balance of power is between franchise cricket and international cricket. Now, the Future Tours programme is about to be announced. I think they meet next week in Birmingham, and the next FTP will be announced. Now, there's virtually going to be an ICC event every year. There is going to be windows for the franchise T20 tournaments. So something will have to give, and what will give is bilateral international cricket. That's the squeeze, and that was the question that I put to Johnny, really, because you sense with Johnny, he's somebody who loves playing 50-over cricket, but there's going to be less of it because there has to be a squeeze somewhere. Now, my frustration has always been with the administrators and their lack of far-sightedness. It seemed obvious to me when the IPL came along in 2008 that was going to be a tremendous challenge for Test cricket moving forward and a tremendous challenge for international cricket, that domestic franchise cricket was going to grow and grow in importance and challenge international cricket. And nobody had the wherewithal to think, right, this is coming, these changes are coming quickly. How do we plan for it? How do we knit it all together? And that's never happened, really. All the administrators have done is try and squeeze as much money from broadcast deals, put as much cricket on the calendar as possible, and they've never really planned it or given it any thought. And that's been a huge frustration to me.
So what you're saying is it's too late to make significant change now?
I think the time has passed. The direction moving forward is obvious. Franchise tournaments are going to grow and grow in importance. There will come a time where essentially cricket becomes the football model, and say take Johnny Bairstow, there might come a time where Venki at KKR says, right Johnny, you're ours, we're going to pay you $5 million a year and you'll play in this franchise tournament in January, you'll play IPL February to May, you'll play in the 100, you'll play in the Big Bash, and you play 4 or 5 franchise tournaments a year. And international boards will find that very difficult to challenge against. So I think that's how it's going. And I think it could have been planned so much better if people had been slightly more far-sighted and recognised both that the IPL in 2008 was a great opportunity for the game, but also a great threat to the way that the game is organised.
There are several huge elephants in the room, based on what Michael was saying there, and perhaps the biggest African one of them all is the fact that there is not a level playing field between England, Australia and India, and everybody else. Now, the South African boards can't pay their players enough to stop them from going away and playing in franchise cricket. Neither can the New Zealand players, neither can the West Indies players be paid enough in terms of a retainer in the same way that the Indian and Australian and English players are. Therefore, they can't stop their players from going away and playing in competitions overseas, and their international teams are compromised. And so you have this imbalance in terms of the way that England can be look after their players. Somebody like Johnny Bairstow, very happy to play for England and not play elsewhere if it's going to impact his money that he's getting from playing for his home team. But there are most of the other countries around the world are not in that boat at all. And so the promise of riches from first of all the IPL and then perhaps the Big Bash, and now South Africa deciding to can their international program in order to set up their own franchise model is as a product of there not being a level playing field in terms of international cricket. And that's a huge problem for the game going forward.
I think the main issue that we got to look at is we got to look at reality. What's happening right now? You know, there are things that have been said by former players, someone like me 5 years ago, 10 years ago. It's already happening. Now, if you're not going to see reality, then it's going to give you the biggest knockout punch you've ever got. So it's not just administrators who run the world game, but administrators who run different boards around the world. They've got to look at reality. They've got to look at the volume of cricket. What is the demand? You've got to go with the economics of the sport. You know, you've got to see what's happening at the moment. It is franchise cricket that is ruling the roost, and it will rule the roost. So don't wait for it to happen, and then you get on your high horse and say, you know, what should we do? It's too late. It's going to happen. There's going to be franchise cricket that is going to rule the roost around the world. Now, how are you going to still have international cricket going? You have to cut the volume. You have to cut bilateral cricket, you know, and go in that direction. You will never be able to stop players around the world going and playing in different franchise cricket in the future. Because if they go to court, they're going to win. You cannot deprive a guy from earning his bread and butter if he's not a contracted player. So remember that. It's going to happen. So cut down on the volume of bilateral series if you want all 3 formats of the game to survive. That is 50-over cricket, 20-over cricket, test match cricket. Emphasis, you know, like Eoin said, I feel is going to go in that direction. Test cricket, 20-over cricket, just because of the franchise model. 50-over cricket might be pushed back, but it can still survive if you focus just on the World Cup. And from the ICC point of view, I think paramount importance should be given to the World Cups. You know, whether it's 2020 World Cup or 50-over World Cup. The bucks have to increase big time, you know, for people to realize that that is a big thing. We want to play it and we want to be part of it. Test cricket will always remain because of the importance it brings to the game. Coming from India, where it's driven, franchise cricket is the most important thing when it comes to filling in the coffers. The players, you go and ask the players, they all want to play Test match cricket. All the youngsters want to play red ball cricket because when you play 10 years red ball cricket, at the end of it, you're remembered for what you've done. Franchise cricket, white ball cricket, you'll be remembered if you win World Cups. It's a big thing to win a World Cup. You have players already choosing what formats they want to play. Take a Hardik Pandya now. He wants to play T20 cricket. And he's very clear in his mind, I don't want to play anything else. He'll play the 50-over cricket because there's a World Cup in India next year. After that, you might see him going from that as well. Same thing is going to happen with a lot of players around the world. They'll start choosing formats. They've got every right to. And, Ben Stokes, what he's done, I respect him for what he's done because he's been honest. He's come out and said, my body can take only so much. I'm not here to please, everyone, that I have to be part of everything. I'm not going to take that pressure. I can play the 20-over game, and I can play Test cricket, which is fabulous. And it's going to be a trend that will be followed by a lot of players around the world. Make no mistake about it.
Yeah, just to add a little bit on the back of what Butch is saying, I think it's obviously about the players and where they do or don't want to play their cricket. But as we mentioned, that the three boards, your India, your Australia and England, they're financially secure. When you look at the South African model, the investment that they're going to get for that franchise tournament that they're going to launch and why they want to have those players involved is massive. You do think if they don't get that investment at some stage, financially they could be broke. And that's why it's so appealing, this new franchise model, and that's why you understand their decision. They probably wouldn't have got the investment if they didn't make their South African players available from the start of that tournament throughout. And they've made that call. It's a big call because you would never want to think that South Africa couldn't qualify for a World Cup or would have to go to Zimbabwe to the pre-qualifier. But it's a case in point where financially they're looking at it and it's the only part that makes sense. So, yeah, I think financially, franchise cricket has definitely got a lot of the boards where they want them.
That point about the general strength of the game throughout the world is a really important one. So there is an imbalance, obviously, in terms of resources that teams like India and England and Australia enjoy vis-a-vis the other countries. And it's really important that everything is done to try and level the playing field as much as you can. It's never going to be a level playing field, but what you don't want is for that imbalance.
How do you do that, Mike?
Well, there are a number of ways to do it. For example, boards, if you want a window for your franchise, you could have to pay for that window, and that money then could be redistributed. But also, it's in the board's own interest, you might call it enlightened self-interest, to make sure that the other countries are as strong as possible. Because if in the end there's only 2 or 3 strong teams, people will switch off, because the beauty of the international game is the competition between 10 or 12 teams or more in ODIs. So, for example, England, under the terms of the new Future Tours programme, which I think is going to be announced next week or the week after, it doesn't look like England will play West Indies in a test series in the Caribbean for the next 5 years. Now, you think back to COVID 2020, when the West Indies came at the height of the summer, and all the rhetoric was from England was, thanks very much for coming, we owe you, we'll definitely pay you back, we'll help. And it doesn't look like there'll be an England test tour of the Caribbean over the next 5 years. Now, West Indies only make money from 2 test tours, India and England, and that's it. So if they're not playing England over 5 years, that's a problem. So those 3 countries that they mention there, India, England and Australia, have to be not just self-interested, they have to be enlightened in trying to help everybody else be as strong as they can for the good of the game.
What about the role of the broadcasters in all this?
Well, the broadcasters, it's the administrators really, because the boards will go to the broadcasters and say, this is what we're putting on the table, what will you pay for it? Now, if they want £1 billion, the broadcasters obviously want a return on that investment. But I think it's about planning how you see the whole game fitting together. And that's where the administrators needed to have been and need to be more enlightened to try and work it. Take the 100, for example, plonked in the middle of the season for a month without much thought given really to the effect on the rest of the game and how it all knits together. Now, you can make a very good argument why the ECB wanted the 100 because of the decline in bilateral rights, but give some thought to how it knits to the rest of the game and how it's going to benefit the rest of the game. That's where really they've been very short-sighted in my view.
Yeah, I totally agree, Ath. I think actually the biggest discrepancy in the imbalance lies in Test match cricket. Test match cricket is extremely expensive to host. Like you mentioned, a lot of test playing nations are solely reliant on India, Australia and ourselves touring, and it doesn't happen enough. The ICC need to chuck more money to countries to actually say, yes, we are going to force tours to happen, and that's going to be the balance. We're going to be able to grow the game in that way and actually stop it becoming a boutique format of the game, because naturally everybody sees it at the moment, but yet there's nothing being done about it.
Very important points by both there, Michael and Eoin. And it comes to the volume. If you want Test cricket to survive, then you cannot have 12 teams playing, 10 teams playing. You keep the top 6, keep the quality of cricket going, and respect quality over quantity. And that's the only way you open up a window for other cricket to be played. Expand teams in one-day cricket, in T20 cricket, if you want the game to spread. But Test cricket, you will have to reduce the number of teams that play. Then it doesn't matter if England doesn't go to the West Indies or West Indies doesn't come to England. If they're in the top 6, they play. If they're not in the top 6, they don't play. So whether it's India, Australia, England, you have to qualify for that top 6 if you want to be around playing Test match cricket. Because you mentioned broadcasting rights. Every time India goes overseas, a lot of the boards around the world don't need to play any cricket for the rest of the year. That's the amount of money that comes in some of the countries where they need the money badly. So, it's a double-edged sword. Why can't an Indian one-day team go there and do that rather than a Test team going there? As Eoin mentioned, it's expensive to host Test match cricket. You spread the game. You want to spread the game, do it with white ball. Ideally, T20 cricket, then 50-over cricket. Cut the volume of 50-over cricket as well and lay emphasis on the World Cup. Bottom line, it's the football model. You've got the EPL, you've got the La Liga, you've got the German league, the South American, Copa America going on. In the future, it's going to be like that. You're going to have one World Cup, the big one, and the rest of it is going to be all different leagues happening around the world.
Ravi, I'll just come back to you on that. Do you not think it's really important to still try and grow the Test match game? And if you're going to sort of minimize it to, say, 6 countries or 6 sides that are playing it, it's going to be very difficult to do that. You're happy to do that, perhaps marginalizing ODI cricket? Is that how you see it?
Absolutely, because what is Test cricket? It tests you. You need quality. If there's no quality, then who's going to watch Test cricket? You're going to have 3-day games, 2-day games if the opposition is not right. I mean, if you get countries who've never played Test cricket and you say come to India or in England in bowler-friendly conditions, either turners or seaming tracks, the game's over in 2 days, 2.5 days. And, you've given the broadcaster, you've taken money from the broadcaster for 5 days. So he's going to be unhappy. The fans are going to be unhappy. And the standard of cricket is going to go down. So keep quality. Quality is important. And in that format of the game, extremely important, for, cricket to survive in the future.
We have to mention the fans as well, spectators who are coming in. It's a bit of a slow trickle in if you're just joining us. We're chatting away because we have no task. We're going to get some cricket at some point, I think, but we have to get 20-over game by 6 o'clock, 6:02. But I think we're going to get some cricket before that, so that's good news. Spectators and fans, I mean, we've already seen instances of it recently where a T20 side will play in one part of the country or in another country, and the Test match side will play at the same time. What about the fans who want to come and see Eoin Morgan in his pomp play perhaps in one form of the game, but he's not there because someone else is playing because he's having to play in a Test side? Do you know what I mean? You're kind of mix and matching it too much. How about the fans?
Yeah, here I feel for them a little bit. And all of us are fans. We grew up with our idols, and if I buy a ticket to a game, I want to go and see Graham Thorpe bat or Brian Lara bat. But given
not me, you never wanted to see me bat.
I would if you picked your hands up. But it's a conflict. And the one thing T20 cricket brings you in short space of time is you can buy a ticket to a game. You might see 2 games in one day. So not only do you go and see Brian Lara bat, but you might see somebody else bat as well.
What about the domestic game, fellas? Where are we headed with that? I mean, the 50-over cricket now has been marginalised. It's behind the wall, the 100. Are they playing too much cricket? Are they not playing enough cricket? How's their development going?
Well, it goes back to the point that I made, that there's been too little thought given to how it knits together. And clearly there's a review happening right now. Andrew Strauss put a blog up on the ECB's website the other day talking about the high performance review that he's leading. They put their principles out there, and that's now gone to the second stage, which is a consultation with the counties to try and come up with a format or a schedule that works better. I think it's the biggest issue in the English game and the world game, actually, getting a simpler structure. And when you talked about the fans and the people who come and watch the game, for them, put yourself in the shoes of an English cricket fan over the last 10 years. My God, the changes from year to year. It's hard enough for us to follow the game as people who are involved in it as our kind of jobs and professions. But from year to year, things change. And I think that's very dangerous, because you're taking people's enthusiasm for the game and preparedness to pay up for the game. You're taking it for granted a little bit, and you can't take it for granted. So you need to try and put a schedule in place that will hold. I know the game is changing rapidly, I understand that, but a schedule that will hold for the next few years, so you can say to your young fans out there, this is what it's going to be, whether it's a month of 50-over cricket at the start, and then 2 months of championship cricket, and then a month of T20 cricket in August, something simple in blocks for people to understand, and that will hold for a period of time so that you do not take people for granted.
I wondered, I mean, I think, I was talking about this on a podcast during the week, that the future looks pretty bleak for the 50-over game in this country, I think. For lots of reasons. That, I mean, the obvious one is that the Pro 50 or whatever it's called is now, it's a second-rate competition. I mean, it's inbuilt that it's a second-rate competition. All of your better players are either playing for England or they're playing in a 100 franchise. And then you have the added part to that, whereby the players who are actually playing in the 50-over cricket are looking over the fence and thinking, I'd rather be doing something else. You know, I might be playing in this, and it's great for my development potentially, but given the choice, I'd rather be playing in the competition where there are lots of eyeballs on me. So you're kind of signing the death warrant of the format by virtue of playing it in the way that it's being played. Now, there is only we're talking very England-centric here. There is only a very limited amount of time where you can play the game of cricket in this country. And we've now got 4 formats, so something has to give. And if that ends up being 50-over cricket, that might well end up being okay. You know, it'd be sad, because it's a terrific format, high skill, high drama at times. However, if I was asked, if it came down to it and you had to lose one format of the game, if you take for granted that the 100 stays, or maybe becomes T20 or whatever it ends up looking like at some point, then I would rather have T20 stay and Test match cricket stay, and the 50-over game would be the one that gets cold. And right now, you look 10 years hence, if the scheduling stays similar to the way that it does now, how does 50-over cricket survive in this country, where there are resources in terms of money, where we do have more professional players than there are perhaps anywhere else in the world apart from India? You know, the thing is basically being written off before our very eyes, whilst we're kind of pretending that we're still interested in it, and we're world champions to go along with that too. I mean, you know, talk about cutting off your nose while your face is still sort of smiling away. It's quite extraordinary to witness what's happening at the minute. And you've talked about a slow creep with a lot of this stuff, you know, since the start of the IPL. You know, a lot of these things have been happening sort of, you know, slow motion crashes. There's an impact here, there's an impact there. But none of this stuff you could look at that is occurring right now in front of us is something that anybody who was looking closely enough wouldn't have foreseen happening at some point. And that's where we are. I mean, I'm sorry to be the voice of doom. It is grey and bleak outside, so I suppose I'll just match up with that. But, you know, I think if one's going to go, it's going to be 50-over cricket here. There might be different elsewhere. I mean, this is the other thing we're talking about, is that nobody's circumstances are the same. All of the countries will see this completely differently. Some countries will be quite happy to see the end of Test match cricket. They won't say it out loud, but they might be quite happy that that ends up being sidelined entirely, and they concentrate on the two white ball formats. Other countries would see it differently. They'd rather keep 50 and Test matches and whatever. Nobody's circumstances are the same, and I suppose this feeds into what you're talking about, and that there isn't any sort of joined up thinking whereby the world recognises that we all rely on one another to make the sport work. And too often it seems to be that the ones that have the most power and the most riches are kind of looked after what's been good for them by thinking that in turn would be good for the game in general. But the game in general has been scrabbling around for the scraps, and the players in the end have had more power than they've ever had at any point in the game, because they have choices now. And as soon as you give human beings choices, what are they going to do? They'll look at it and say to themselves, okay, well, I could work 12 months of the year be on the road, never see my family, and I could earn X, or I could work for 6 weeks of the year and earn 3 times X, and then for the rest of the time just pick and choose what I'm going to do. Now, most people given the choice to earn more and do less would do that, wouldn't they?
Yeah, I just want to jump in a little bit about the format. I would hate for the 50 over games to be thrown. I understand where you're coming from, and I understand the strength. But I just think I was on the boards when they were giving Test status to Ireland and to Afghanistan, and I was always concerned that how would they be able to sustain that Test status? The current crop, yes, they can produce a certain performance, but down the line, where's the guarantee that they'll be able to continue to produce Test cricketers to be able to be competitive? And would they be given enough exposure? They haven't been given enough exposure. There hasn't been enough opportunity for them to develop. So what's probably will end up happening, as Butch said, is you're going to have 5 or 6 countries maybe stopping Test cricket. And then where's your longer format? You don't have any longer format if you get rid of the 50 over game. The mini Test match that sometimes a 50 over game can be referred to is paramount in the game, in the world game, in order to be able to teach people to bat for a longer period. We saw an interview there with Johnny Bairstow where he says he feels that you learn your technique in the 4-day game, and then you're able to bring it out in the biggest stage of the T20 and be able to show your skills off. The other problem I do have with all the leagues that are going around is that the 4-day game, maybe not in this country because of the time of year that you play, but it's been underdone. A lot of our star players in South Africa are off playing in different leagues. So when the 4-day competition comes around, they're not involved. So your 4-day competition becomes very, very weak. And what sort of standard are you sort of creating and preparing these players for when they have to make the step up to play Test cricket? So therein lies my concern. I'd be very disappointed at the 50 over. Also, if you look at clubs, schools, all the sort of other people who play cricket around the world, it's often a 40 or 50 over game. That is their bread and butter. That was where they grow up playing from a young age right through to varsities or whatever. So to mean that that's worth nothing, and that your skills that you've developed over the years is just thrown away, and you've either got to somehow find a way to play a Test match or a T20, that's a bit of a concern for me.
I want to sort of finish with a positive spin, really, because we've come up with 1 or 2 solutions that perhaps can help the administrators and broadcasters. But purely from a cricketing perspective, do you think that the sort of formats complement each other in many ways? I mean, we've seen some incredible Test matches recently where, well, Ben Stokes in 2019 that said actually T20 helped me play that innings. ODI cricket, I guess by its nature, more people get the chance to do that than they do in T20 cricket, so they're developing their skills. Johnny spoke to you and he talked about perhaps their ODI cricket being a bit closer to Test match cricket in terms of some of the skills. So my point being, are they sort of interrelated cricket-wise, and are we actually benefiting from what's happened with all the formats playing together?
I think they are related in many ways. Certainly having grown up with 3 formats, 2 to start with, and the introduction of T20 cricket has hugely benefited my game. It's ended up in me being a white ball specialist, but my aspiration was always to be a Test match cricketer. I think the natural theme of things is that everything is getting squeezed, from the international schedule to the county schedule, and something has to give. And if we don't, like to come back to Atherton's point initially, we have to be forward thinking about this. Where is the game going to be in 10 years, and what's going to have to give way? What do we hold closest to our heart, identify it, and then protect it?
If I could make just one plea, it would be to slightly rebalance the thinking away from simply how do we make as much money from the game to what is the best for the game and what's the best for the cricketers and cricket. And when we have been covering the Bob Willis Trophy in the first week of October, freezing our backsides off at Lord's, you know that somewhere down the line something has gone wrong if you are covering first-class cricket in England in October. That cannot be right. So try and rebalance and think what is the best for the game and try and knit it all together more easily and more successfully. It's not an easy challenge because we're a long way down the line now, and as I said, the tipping point has come, but I think better decisions can be made.
So can we say, to sort of sum it all up, that we think ODI cricket is probably best if it sort of continues to move and play less, and perhaps play more T20 cricket and a little bit more Test cricket? Is that how you see it?
Yeah, potentially. I think that again, the key thing, if we're going to actually change things and make meaningful change, everybody has a part to play. And when change normally happens or is proposed, everybody sits behind their own desk and looks after themselves. So counties do it, franchises do it, national teams do it. But look outward, like Ath mentioned earlier. Look at the teams down the bottom. Look at the team at the top. Meet somewhere in the middle. Everybody is going to have to compromise at some stage and work together to make this significant change happen.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Guys, thank you very much as well upstairs for all your various contributions along the way, Polly, Ravi and Butch.